Hello, everybody. Today we have Nadia. Hi, Nadia.
Hello.
And we have Haley.
Hi.
Haley Friedman is a college admissions consultant, and we're super happy to have her here today because it's a hot topic right now is college admissions because right now here we are mid-April 2024 and people have sent in their college applications and have received results, whether or not they've gotten admission to schools, and they're making their decisions about where they're going. So we're really happy to have Haley here. We typically talk about health issues on this podcast, and college admissions is undoubtedly a stressful time. So this is a little bit of a combination of college admissions information and how to handle stress. Haley is a college admissions consultant who works with high school students and their families to guide them through the college application process. And she graduated from UC Berkeley in 2011, and she loved it so much that she stayed on working there full time for 10 years. She loves working with high school students. I know that personally because she worked with a high school student that I know. And she considers herself a cheerleader and a coach, helping students get past the static noise of the college application process and stay connected to themselves so they can find and be admitted to colleges where they will thrive. She holds a certificate in college counseling from UC San Diego Extension, and she's an associate member of the Independent Educational Consultants Association, which is an important association to have. You know, there's a lot of people out there, as you know, in all professions, there are people that can say that they give information about nutrition, but like, where did they get that information from? Weekend studying on the internet, or did they actually get certified somewhere? And so same with college counselors. Like after having my two kids apply to college, I feel like I could be a college counselor. Like I've done it, but no, I can't. I am not a member of any sort of organization of people that gets certified in college counseling. I am not able to give good information, but I'm so happy to have Haley here. Nadia, I think you have a few questions for her.
I do. Thank you so much for coming today. My first question is, how did you decide to become a college admissions consultant?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you both so much for having me. This is incredible and something that I'm super passionate about as well. I'm excited to be here. I've also always been passionate about higher education. As Alyssa said, I worked at UC Berkeley for 10 years in the Cal Alumni Association, and I was getting ready for something new. And as I kind of thought about what my next move was going to be, I knew I wanted a job where I could be of service to people on a peer-to-peer level, like something where I felt like I was making a difference. And my mother-in-law is actually a college admissions consultant, and she encouraged me to look into consulting, and it just checked all of my boxes. And so I got my certificate and started seeing students, and it's incredibly rewarding. Sometimes challenging, of course, as with anything, but I really feel lucky to have this job.
Yeah,
Nice.
I feel like
so you're like a legacy, actually.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I feel like a college admissions consultant is just a super useful person to have by your side because I mean, I didn't use you personally, but I had a college admissions counselor during my application process, and I feel like without her, I think I would have been a little bit, I don't know, it would have been a much more stressful process. But yeah, it would have. I really think your job is very useful and something that people don't think about very often.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my second question is, what tips do you have for high school students or, college students applying for grad school to manage the stress levels during the application process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I kind of break it down on a couple of different levels. So there's the procedural level of like actually getting through the college application process, the grad school application process. break things up into chunks. Like, don't try and do it all at once. When I meet with students, we're meeting on set intervals, and every time we meet, they get a homework assignment, just like they would with school. And so it's broken up into, little manageable chunks rather than like if you're writing a paper, you start early and you're pacing yourself. It's a lot less stressful than if you pull an all-nighter. And then on a mental health level, I always try and be really, I try and emphasize to my students that this process and the results of the process, where you get in or don't get in, does not define you as a person. So where you go to college does not define you as a person. You can have your goals and you can work hard for them, and you can want to go to, some really prestigious universities. And I fully support that, and I can help give you the tools to accomplish that. But ideally, when you're applying to college, you're showcasing what your passions are this far in life. So how do you spend your time? Like, what excites you? What do you like to study? And that's oftentimes a more healthy way to look at the admissions process than trying to like turn yourself into something that you think colleges want. So putting yourself forward and saying like, this is who I am and what I'm excited about, versus, trying to move yourself into like this little box that you think that colleges are looking for. So yeah, those are my 2 tips for managing stress levels.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. Like, I mean, it's one of those things that's almost easier said than felt, but like the whole what college you get into doesn't define you. I don't know. I want to hear Nadia's thought on this. It's kind of rough because it feels like everyone's announcing it. They're announcing it with their sweatshirts at school and with an Instagram post. And it's like this brand that you put on yourself almost. And it's hard when whatever school it is that you're going to or get into doesn't, the reputation of that school doesn't reflect like the reputation you think you're trying to uphold for yourself. Do you have thoughts on that, Nadia? Like,
well, I was actually going to ask about this later, but yeah, I just feel like probably much has to do with social media, but there's a lot that I feel goes into it that is, I mean, primarily unnecessary. But when you're announcing where you're going to college, like it's like you're announcing this new part of your life that's like connected to you, and I don't know, you're setting you want to set your best foot forward and have people be excited for you and like almost be jealous of you, like it's a very weird thing. Yeah, so it is hard in the beginning to not have the college that I think, well, I feel like that is mostly for like someone that isn't super happy about where they're going to school. In the beginning, I feel like I wasn't super set on Northeastern in the beginning. I didn't know if I wanted like Northeastern to define me, even though it didn't have to. But now looking back on it, I really enjoy my time here. So I enjoy having Northeastern like define this part of my life, but not necessarily me, my personality. But it's a hard thing to do when you are applying and getting into schools that you might not be super excited about.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And I think with students, when I'm working with students, I try and work on having them build a balanced college list. Like we've all heard this, like your reach, your target, your safety schools. And rather than thinking about them as safety schools, I like to say likely schools, because safety has this kind of negative connotation. But I really try and urge students to imagine themselves at all of their schools. And like we spend a lot of time when we're building college lists of like not just focusing on that upper echelon of schools, but focusing on schools that are like really achievable, and like why you would like that, so that if it does come down to like it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Like I've had students who have like 4.2, 4.3, and they're set on like UC Santa Barbara or somewhere that like a few years ago would have been like, a slam dunk with that GPA. And now it's kind of like, I don't know, like maybe not.
Yeah.
Um, so that if the worst happens where like you don't get into those schools that you really had your heart set on, you still have some like concrete reasons like, okay, yes, I remember, like I actually really did like this school. But I totally get it that it's like, you're kind of like a peacock trying to show your feathers, and it
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
a really lesser feeling if you don't feel like, you're putting forth an adequate image, especially on social media.
Yeah.
Haley,
But
are you aware that like a lot of high schools have like not just like on your personal Instagram can people see what school you go to, but high school will say something like, I don't know, Brown High School, class of 2024, next steps or decisions.
yeah.
And so like, people can just pour through like where everybody at your school is going and where you're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. No, I know. Back in the day when I was in high school, it was like on an actual wall. They posted where you're going. And now, of course, it's on like Instagram or TikTok. And I think the whole process is just a lot of pressure and students wanting to do the best that they can, and to feel like their efforts have been validated. So yeah, it's hugely tricky.
Totally. Yeah. But in the end, I also feel like it's super exciting. You get to, be proud of where you're going, and I personally, not being in high school anymore, really like looking at those accounts. I just like to know where everyone's going. It's cool to see where people are going to be in the next 4 years. But yeah.
Me too, as a parent. Like I knew some of
Yeah.
these kids when they were little, and now I get to like imagine where they are, like, oh my gosh, they're going to be in New York or they're going to be in Texas or wherever they're going to be, these little kids that I used to know. And it's not a matter of like judging them, like whether or not they're like, whatever, a good student or a bad student, but it's just like me, curious about these people that I like knew when they were a child and care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
hopefully, I mean, people recognize that, like, you and I are not judging Jane Smith or whatever for posting on Instagram that she's going to, any school. Like, we're like,
Mhm.
oh, that's really cool. That would be a great fit for Jane. Versus like, oh, Jane. Like, no one's doing that really except
Yeah.
yourself. And I think that's,
Mhm.
I mean, really hard, as you said, Alyssa, to think of in the moment, but it's like hopefully people are supportive, but I know it can be hard. It's wonderful and terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So my third question is, what would you say is the best way to start the college or grad school application process?
Yeah. So when I start working with students, and you don't have to be working with an admissions consultant to do this, but I always start with an in-depth interview. So asking my students, like, what are you interested in? What are your academic strengths? Like, what's your GPA? What kind of classes are you taking? How much have you thought about college? What are you nervous about? What do you want in your college experience? So this like really comprehensive interview, where I can just get a baseline of where they are. And if you are working with a consultant, hopefully they do this with you. And if you're not working with a consultant, there are these Coursava cards where they can kind of like help you think about some of these things as well. And a lot of this stuff is kind of common sense when you're looking through a college search process. But for me, it's really helpful to have that conversation with students, to get a baseline of like exactly who they are and what their goals are. And then from there, I start on this building block process that I'm really passionate about. So like if someone's not sure what they want to major in, I can have them take some interest inventories to see if there are some like common threads or passions that we can start to think about, like, oh, have you considered X, Y, or Z major, and biting off like small little chunks as I was talking about earlier. So what's your major going to be? Like, what are you going to, what are your extracurriculars? Like, how many AP classes are you going to take? And so that's a really good start, I guess, is that the interview.
Yeah, finding what you want just by asking a bunch of questions. Yeah. So also going off of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about researching schools, like that part of the process. I know for me, and I think for my sister as well, we're just researching schools in general. It was a little bit overwhelming. There's just a lot of information that you can find, and
Yes.
you're not really sure where to start. So I was just wondering what kind of tips you had for that.
Yeah, totally. There's so much information out there, which is both helpful and, overwhelming at times. So I would say like finding a website that you really like, that can help you research colleges. So there's like 1,000 websites out there, but they all list information a little bit differently. So finding one that clicks with how you like to learn. So some are more visual, some have like 1,000 different filters, some you have to pay for. I really like niche.com. To me, that's like my holy grail that I recommend to students. It's free. It's got all kinds of filters. The information is easy to digest. You can get more detailed if you want. But find yours. And then also along that same line, like maybe you're not a website person. Maybe you want to read. There's a Fisk guide, which is like a massive tome of text-based stories, about colleges. Or maybe you're like many of the high school students today, maybe you're a social media person. And so every college is going to be on TikTok. Every college is going to be on YouTube. So if you're scrolling through your phone, then meet yourself where you are and look at them that way. And then if you're having a hard time researching from your home, I am hugely passionate that it can be so helpful to physically step foot on campus. And so that doesn't mean like you have to go visit every school on your list, but to just visit colleges that are, close by, or maybe you're taking a trip somewhere that you can just pop over and spend an afternoon visiting a campus. So I recommend going to visit like a large public university, a smaller public university, and then a smaller private university. And those three different types of colleges, like when you actually are physically there, you can imagine yourself there and like what it might be like to go to a school like this, can really be helpful for like narrowing down that college search.
Yeah.
Yeah, we experienced that for sure. Well, Nadia, not so much, because when she graduated from high school is 2022. So a lot of the time it was during like quiet pandemic time. So that was kind of hard we did visit schools, but it was a different situation.
Yeah.
My younger daughter, Lucy, she got to visit a lot of schools, and there were some schools on her list that she thought would be good, likely schools for her to apply to. And then she went and she's like, oh boy, no, like this is definitely not. And everything on paper was like perfect. It seemed so perfect. And then when we went there, it was so not perfect. So it was really great to see schools in person. And I would say, even like you said, even if it's not the school that you're applying to, but kind of like a school that represents the type of setting that you're going to be applying to, would be kind of interesting, at least in the beginning. Like, say you don't have the time or the finances to go all the way to the East Coast to check out a school. If you live in the West Coast, then maybe you can visit a similar kind of school nearby that you can drive to, and then see if you're like yay or nay on the tiny school,
Yeah,
like
totally.
Nadia saw a tiny school in Oregon one time that she wasn't going to apply to, but after seeing the tiny school, she was like, okay, definitely not like 1,200 per class, or was it total school? I don't know. It was
I
tiny.
have no clue. It was just super small, and I was like, okay, I feel like I know my limit, like of smallest school that I would want to go to, and it's going to be bigger than that. But
Exactly.
yeah, I feel, it's definitely good to step on campus, kind of imagine yourself there. And I also had a kind of experience of, everything looked good on paper with one of the schools I applied to. And then I visited, and the vibe on campus was not like bad. I don't know, I couldn't necessarily see myself there. And it kind of set me off a little bit. But I had already applied, so it was, just for my own, just to know. But yeah, it's definitely helpful to step foot on campus.
Yeah.
All right. So, and I would say that, like, as a mom with a kid going through application process, I was tempted to have my kid apply to a lot of schools, a lot of the highly selective, highly rejective schools. But for both of my kids, I saw they didn't apply to that many schools. I think they applied to around 12. There were reasons for both of them to not do it. For Nadia, I feel like when she was going through it, she was starting to burn out as she was like doing these applications. And so I feel like, if I had her do so many, it would just end up being overwhelming and just like suck the life out of her. And then for Lucy, like, she already was excited about a school that she got into, but then after a while, like, some of the highly selective schools were giving their answers later. And it was just, even though she wasn't really expecting to get in, it was still disappointing. Even though you're probably not going to get in, it's still like a little, gut. Yeah. And you're like, wait, what? I mean, even though it's selective, you still like, wait, why not? And so that doesn't feel good to hear that over and over again, even though you were kind of expecting it, So yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And I advise students again to, like, be conscious with your list and apply for a reason. Don't just, pick every single school that you think you might go to. Like, find reasons that you really are passionate about 10 to 12 schools, and then put your whole self into those applications. Like, know why you want to go there. Like, what values do those schools fit for you, and to really put it all into those, rather than just like moderately applying to 20 schools or 30 schools, which I've definitely seen as well.
Right. So, okay. So going back to my original question, which spurred my question of how many schools. Okay. When you're making your list of 10 to 12 schools, or once you've found out when you've gotten into schools and you have, whatever, the 5 schools that you've gotten into, what are some tips you have for a student that feels like they can't figure out which is their perfect fit school?
Yeah. I just wrote a blog post about this.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I know. It's a good question. It's called "So You Got Into College." So I would say, like, you have your list of, like, whatever 5 schools that you got into, and you can't decide which one. So go back to that original interview and be like, okay, like, this is what I wanted back then. Like, maybe you updated it for how you're feeling right now, but like, kind of go back to those core values. Like, what is actually important to me? And what do I want out of my college experience? And which one of these schools is going to get me to accomplish my goals? So I think that, like, values-based approach to thinking about selecting your college is really helpful if you can avoid that, like, brand name call of like, oh, which one is going to look cool to my friends? And maybe the one that is going to look cool to your friends is also the one that's going to be the best fit to you, but also maybe not. And so you have to think about that. And then, of course, there's things like, thinking about your finances, like what financial aid packages look like for each school is really important. But yeah, I think mostly just checking in with yourself if everything else is like apples to apples, of like, truly, where am I going to be happiest for the next 4 years?
What if you don't think you're going to be happy at any of your options?
Oof. And I would say,
I guess that's a loaded question. How are you going to answer that?
I would say as an admissions consultant, if someone said like, I'm going to be happy at none of these, I would be like, well, let's talk about your list and like, why were these schools on your list in the first place? Like at, X school, you said you would be excited to do this activity and take classes from this professor. Like, so what's changed there? And why wouldn't you be happy at that school? So I think that's more of like an internal question of like, you're just really nervous or like what is going on? And then there's also always the option of going to community college. Like if it didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go, it's not the end of the world. Like you can go to a phenomenal community college, you can save money, make friends, have amazing experiences, and then transfer into the four-year school of your choice. And that transfer process is often less, not always, but it is often less competitive than the freshman application process. So you always, always, always have options.
Yeah.
And on that note, how often are you spending time coaching parents and students about disappointment? And like, have you ever had somebody so disappointed in their options that they got mad at you?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an intense process, right? Like there's a lot of feelings on behalf of the student. There's a lot of feelings on behalf of the parents. They just want what is best for their kids, and they see their kids working so hard to make these goals. And so I definitely have had conversations with parents and students of like, what happened? Like, why aren't I getting into these schools that I thought that I was going to get into? And so it can be really hard. Like it can be really heartbreaking. It's so competitive these days. And so you can be someone who on paper is like completely admissible, and you get, waitlisted or deferred or denied. And there's nothing like, there's not really anything you can do about it other than say like, hey, look at all these schools you did get into. Like, this is amazing. Like going back to that conversation on the list of like, you said you were going to be so thrilled to go study whatever political science with, Dr. Ryan and learn about international relations, and they have the best study abroad program. So really like highlighting those like positive things can oftentimes help offset some of the negatives. And I mean, Alyssa, was part of your question if anyone's ever blamed me for their kids not getting it? I don't think so. Not to my face, at least. I try and be really, really transparent with how difficult it is.
You mentioned testing, hot topic in college admissions right now. Let's see. When Nadia going through the pandemic, it was like, okay, college were like test optional. People couldn't even get into their tests. I think Nadia's ACT test got postponed like, I don't know, lots and lots of times.
I was supposed to do it like in December, and then I ended up doing it in June. So that was definitely not ideal.
Yeah. So what do you have like an inside scoop on that? Like, what is that about? Why did tests go optional to like required? Why are they going back on that?
Said they're never changing the policy, but as Alyssa said, we're seeing schools that said we're going to be test optional until whatever year, now coming back on that and saying like, hey, actually we're going to need you to take that test. And so what's happening now, specifically at elite university, those like highly rejective, highly selective colleges, is that they are working off of mostly the same one study done by Harvard, I'm pretty sure, that is saying that standardized testing actually is a good indicator of student success in the classroom, and that standardized tests are a way that it's like essentially another data point where you've got, your essay, which those are being affected by AI. right now. So the essay is another really hot topic of like what's going to happen with that. Then you've got your grades, you've got your rigor of your classes, and the standardized test is like another data point that schools can use. So we're seeing quite a few of those really rigorous colleges saying like, okay, no, this is going to be mandatory. And even as soon as for next year's class, where some of them they would be test optional through like 2026. And now they're saying like, hey, actually, just kidding on that. So it's really hard for students to kind of stay up with this, because some students really do better test optional, and that's like a huge boon to their confidence. And testing doesn't always tell the whole story of a student's academic abilities. But from an admission standpoint, I understand using it as one point of information in your decision.
Yeah, that's hard. Those tests are not fun.
No, not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier something about access, access to SAT tutors and stuff like that, affecting maybe like, we're bringing up the conversation of, is it fair and all that. But what kind of advice do you have for people that aren't able to afford, a college admissions consultant? I know you mentioned all those websites, but I was wondering if there's any other tips that you might have.
Yeah, so there's a scale, right? Like if you have maybe not enough money to hire a college admissions consultant, could you do like a camp? So I am going to be a coach for the second year at the Lair of the Golden Bear, which is Cal's summer camp up in the Pinecrest in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And they do a 4-day intensive college prep camp. The cost is like, I think it's about $1,400, which is, less than it would cost to hire a college admissions consultant to work one-on-one with your student through the whole process of applying to college. So you're getting, some guidance, not, that like really hands-on one-on-one guidance, but it's still a huge help. And, it's a truncated experience. So you're doing a lot of work in a short amount of time, but then you have, most of your work done.
Right.
Then if you have like no resources or no money to spend on like college prep, there's a ton of books out there. There's like College Admissions for Dummies. There's a ton of free resources. College Essay Guy, Ethan Sawyer, is amazing. And he has I'm sure, I don't know if you guys remember if you used him, but like he has so many free resources out there. And so just like it was finding a website that you like.
Really, can you say his name again?
Yeah, College Essay Guy, Ethan Sawyer. He's like the coolest person, like hugely respectable. He's written a couple of books, but he is one of his core values is access, and so he makes a ton of his resources available to students for free. And so it's kind of like you're having to lead yourself a little bit more. You have to have a little bit more motivation, but like the resources are out there for you to kind of lead yourself through the process too.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's also nice to know that there's those resources out there, and that camp seems pretty cool. I've never heard of something like that before.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's a lot of work. We do writing, so you'd have hopefully a pretty good draft of your Common App personal statement, and then a list of colleges to apply to, all in 4 days. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, you've got to be pretty focused, but it's a great way to really focus on college applications if you don't have time or you don't want the process to drag out for a long time.
Yeah, get things done quick.
Yeah.
So from our last question, I wanted to ask about family tension type situations, what tips do you have for tension between parents and students during this time? There's a lot of, a student might want something that their parents don't necessarily agree with, or vice versa. So I was wondering if you had any tips.
Yeah, man. Um, well, it can really be helpful if you do have the resources to hire a college admissions consultant, because a lot of times, like having a conversation that might be tricky with your parents, especially if you're clashing on, college stuff, is a lot easier to talk to like a neutral third party about.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be helpful to have that person, even if it's maybe like a family friend or just someone, if you are having trouble talking with your parents, to have someone neutral to chat with. I also think it's a really important time for parents to listen to their kids, and to honor that time where it's like, okay, my baby, I have a 1-year-old right now who I can't imagine going to college and like, that whole process. But your baby is going to be embarking on their own journey into adulthood. And so for parents, it's really important to take your listening ears out and be like, okay, like let me, if you can, if you can, it's probably harder, easier said than done, but like let me look at my child as an individual, and what are you interested in? And if that is different than like the idea that I have for you, like tell me why. Like, and so it's a really good opportunity for parents to see their kids as individuals. And ideally, they've like students have done this work of like, what do I want out of college?
Mm-hmm.
And if they have, for the parents to listen to what's on their hearts, because so much of this process is a student figuring out like what's important to them. And then the other tip I really like to give families who are having a hard time with,
Mm-hmm.
tension around college, is that it can be so helpful to set a defined time to talk about college applications. So if you have like a weekly or a biweekly one-on-one, where you have a check-in, and so everyone feels like they're in the loop, but it's not like, dinner every day, like, hey, did you decide you're going to the college I want you to go to, or like what's going
Yeah.
on? That can be really helpful. So it doesn't, take up 100% of your airspace, which can feel really suffocating to a student. Um, but everyone, still has a stake and knows what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are very helpful tips, and
Yeah.
I'm really I'm really glad that we get to have you on the show. I mean, on our podcast today, because I don't know, I feel like I said a lot of stuff in the last time we talked about college, my whole college application process, with not a lot of pieces of advice for people to, take on like when they're actually going through it. So this was very helpful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah. I mean, it's such a tender time, and it's like different for everyone, but for me, it's really a time where a student gets to explore like, who they are, who they want to be, like what direction they want to go in.
Yeah. And I
Definitely.
guess as from my parent perspective, I would say, wow, it is really a tender time. And when you talk about it, I think about how like maybe some parents think of this as the last time that they're really going to be able to have a hand at like influencing what their kid is doing. Um, but I guess my overall advice would be it's going to work out. Like even if you make the wrong decision, or even if you don't go to the perfect school for you, like it doesn't need to be this like path that doesn't have other options after it. It's not like a one-way street. So you can go to the school and really, really not like it and be like, okay, I know exactly what I don't want. And now I'm going to go in a different direction. Or, you can think that you have and this is a terrible situation, but you think that you have the financial means to go to a particular school, and you start and you're like, wait a second, like we bit off more than we can chew. I think we're going to have to like take it a step back and do something different. Like, you know, those are tough things, but we learn a lot from those tough situations. So I would say, you know, no matter what, as long as you like keep an open mind and try to get the best out of the situation that you're in, it's going to be. Well, thank you, Haley. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope this information is helpful for all those parents and high school students that are out there listening, and also to the, you know, I think all this information is applicable to people, college students that are applying to grad school too.
Yeah. Thank you so much.